Ah, OK, great. Je m'appelle Pete Fein et ma présentation d'aujourd'hui est appelée Free Software, Free People. D'année 2010 à 2013, j'étais un hacktiviste, soutenir la liberté d'expression partout dans le monde. Je ne pouvais pas être plus heureux de parler ici, à Montréal, qui s'est vraiment résisté à la loi 78. Apologies for my pronunciation. That is the most French I have spoken in 20 years. I'm going to be talking about free software today, and I want us to try to remember what that originally stood for. If I use the words open source, I want everyone to pretend they're Richard Stallman and immediately shout out free software. Okay? Okay, let's practice. In 1998, with the help of IBM, open source software was invented. Great. I was an agent with Telecomix, an ad hoc cluster of internauts who defended free speech online. We had no formal members, no leaders, no spokesperson. We took no money at all. Called tech support for the Arab Spring, we worked with people from all over the world to facilitate communication using free software. To be clear, we only did comms support. We didn't plan protests or do anything violent or destructive. The cluster was founded in 2009 by the same folks who started the Swedish Piratbyrån movement and the Pirate Bay. Telecomix agents hailed from all over the globe, mostly Europe, and came from a variety of backgrounds. A few seasoned activists, a member of the European Parliament, many sysadmins, and plenty of people with no technical skills at all. We gathered on a self-hosted IRC network and ran wikis, etherpads, VPNs, an IM server, and custom-built darknets. We tended to have about 150 humans and 30 machines at a time, though several hundred people participated at some point or another. We operated as an adhocracy. Much like a free software project, if you had a good idea, you found some friends and just went to work. This effort took over my life for over 2 years. I didn't have a job, I burned all my savings, I barely wrote code, and it remains one of the most compelling things I've ever done. I joined Telecomix shortly before the Jan 25's protests in Egypt's Tahrir Square, and I worked 20 hours a day for the next 8 days trying to keep the internet running in the face of government censorship. We'd get Egyptians on our IRC who were blocked from Twitter, and we'd take news reports and photos and tweet them out using the Telecomix account, acting like a human proxy. That was the kind of facilitation of communication that we did. After Mubarak shocked the world by disconnecting Egypt from the internet, we devolved to 1980s technology, running 500 dial-up modem lines and sending fax spam with messages of support and treatments for tear gas. We didn't call up Hillary Clinton to call Obama, to call Mubarak, to say, please turn it back on. We took direct action and did what we could ourselves. The Egyptians thanked us, but I told them to just get our backs if something went down in the States. 8 months later, they did. I was at a human rights conference in San Francisco when police across the bay violently attacked Occupy Oakland. One of the conference attendees was Egyptian, and he organized a solidarity protest in Tahrir in support of the occupiers. That summer, I met a documentary filmmaker who had worked in Tahrir's media tent. She told me about the gardener at her family's house and their discussion about an upcoming election. She said that she had intended to vote for candidate X, and the gardener came back the next day and said, I voted for X because you told me to. Elections were meaningless. 50 years of dictatorship had left Egyptians without the civic habits necessary for effective democracy. Telecomix's next major operation was in Syria. We acted as tech support for an entire country for almost 2 years. We worked closely with Syrians on the ground for months on end, helping them speak freely and safely online, and leak documents, including a list of 35,000 people wanted by the secret police. This was extremely hands-on. You can't just give somebody a tour and tell them to have a nice, anonymous day. At times, we hijacked most of Syria's web traffic, using a script to change DNS settings on cable and DSL modems that still had the default vendor password. We redirected requests for Facebook and Google to a page that informed Syrians they were under surveillance and provided tools for defense. In 2013, as the situation deteriorated towards civil war, agents helped 4 people and their families get out of the country. Our investigations of the Syrian nets in 2011 uncovered evidence of blue coat hardware proxies being used to censor the net in violation of US sanctions. After the logs were leaked, I wrote a post for Slashdot, and the story eventually made it to the front pages of the Washington Post and Wall Street Journal, where the company finally admitted responsibility. Telecomix agents then worked in the Brussels headquarters of the European Union to ban the sale of censorship and surveillance technology to Syria, the first time the EU had implemented such export controls. This story captures what Telecomix did so well, from highly technical network scans to media hacking to affecting political change. There was no coordinated effort or deliberate intent, yet somehow a disorganized group of sketchy hackers managed to change international law. A few days after the defeat of SOPA in 2012, protests began in Poland against the imminent passage of the ACTA copyright treaty. Telecomix served as a back channel where organizers from the pirate parties, digital rights NGOs, and Anons could coordinate resistance on the streets and in the legislatures. The protests spread all over Europe, including 300,000 people in Germany alone. The irony was that the back channel was actually really quiet because we were all so busy. This video is from the protests in Warsaw, Poland. I don't have any audio. Okay. There were about 15,000 people at this event, and they're hopping because it's late January and it's really frickin' cold. One of my favorite banners from the Polish protests read, "From Moscow to Brussels, we will get free speech." The Polish prime minister then sat down with the country's internet for a 7-hour debate, taking questions from Twitter, Facebook, Google+, a live audience, and it was broadcast on national TV. Telecomix agents felt those platforms were too proprietary, so we hosted an IRC channel for the discussion as well. The prime minister withdrew his support and issued a statement encouraging other European leaders to do the same, and the treaty was defeated at the last minute. Poland has since begun exploring intellectual property reform, including shorter copyright terms and file sharing rights. Yeah. In his book, Hackers, Heroes of the Computer Revolution, Stephen Levy described the hacker ethic, a body of concepts, beliefs, and mores that animated the early hacker culture at MIT and Stanford. Though written 30 years ago, this list pretty well describes both free software and activist hackers. To highlight a few, number 3, the principle of decentralization gives rise to both Telecomix's adhocracy and Python's BDFL consensus model. It also encourages forking, not only of source code, but in Telecomix's case, of the cluster itself, which spawned the global crypto party movement. To number 4, I'd add gender and point out how much progress we've made since I first attended PyCon in 2007 when it was 95% dudes. And let me tell you, that sucked for the men, too. In Telecomix, we often didn't know agents' real names or where they were from, and we didn't care. But it's the first ideal, the hands-on imperative, that's so compelling. To be a hacker means to not passively accept what we're given, but rather to explore and improve. As hackers, we're unwilling to settle for external limitations in our software, in ourselves, in our society. I'd like to add to Levy's list an ethic of mutual aid, the idea that people can help each other out on a purely voluntary basis. When working with Telecomix or on free software, I've learned that almost anything worth doing cannot be done alone. It takes the cooperation of a community with a range of skills and commitment to make something manifest and real. Biela Coleman argued in her first book, Coding Freedom, that the success of free software came from a politics circumscribed to the creation of technology, enabling it to avoid the trap of traditional left-right dichotomies. Programmers, myself included, dislike politics. It's messy and stupid and inefficient. In the thousands of people I chatted with as an activist, I encountered maybe one or two other developers. I don't think this is good enough anymore. The internet has become too deeply integrated into our lives. If sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic, then hackers are wizards with power to reshape the world. It's fear of this power that's caused governments to persecute us, the nerd scare Biela spoke about yesterday. When the Snowden revelations came out in March 2013, I was so freaked out I got stoned for 3 days straight. Not because of the content. The NSA's technical capabilities were already pretty well known, at least among the security crowd, but rather because if we weren't able to change things politically, surveillance would become permanent and normal. It's between 2 years, and aside from more disasters like Heartbleed, very little has changed. Throughout history, a surveillance state has never voluntarily dismantled itself. And I'd like to spend the rest of my time today trying to answer the question, now what? Now what? The Restore the Fourth movement came out of Reddit and organized protests against surveillance around the United States for Independence Day 2013. I was really excited to see other people take up my causes. For a change, I didn't have to do anything besides show up. We marched through downtown Chicago parks filled with visiting tourists. A protester wrote a message in chalk on the sidewalk when a cop casually stepped on his hand and then detained him. There was only one cop, so I grabbed the guy and I tried to de-arrest him, and a crowd forms. And the cop's writing a ticket and I start harassing him. What are you citing him for? You got your little book there? Tell me what you're going to write down. And the cop says, oh, I don't know what law he's breaking, but I'm sure it's illegal. Like, how would you like it if someone chalked the sidewalk outside your house? And I tell him, I don't know where you live, but people in my neighborhood do that all the time. At this point, the cop looks like an idiot, and he eventually lets the guy go, who, scared, starts cheering for the police. What bothered me was how practiced that cop was, and that it clearly wasn't the first time he'd stepped on somebody's hand like that for writing on the sidewalk. We're facing a cultural problem that's much bigger and deeper than the technical or political ones that Snowden brought to light. And it's this culture of authoritarianism that we need to change. Enrique Bastos has been a powerful voice at this conference for many years, and I had the opportunity to visit him in Rio de Janeiro. He told me about this music called Brazilian funk, which has nothing to do with American funk, that's made in the favelas, the incredibly poor and violent shanty towns. It's quite popular, but some of it is outright illegal to play because it's anti-government and glorifies violence and drug lords. He told me that if you were to try to send the police to stop them from playing it, they'll just shoot you. And they teach their children how to make it. Control is the most expensive thing in the world, he says. At the end of the day, you have to play the police. This notion we've had for the last 50 years that information wants to be free is wrong. It's wrong. Information wants nothing. Control is the most expensive thing in the world. That provides a hint to a method. If we want greater freedom, we can make control more costly. And we can do that simply by being free, by practicing freedom in our daily lives. One of the organizers of Occupy Boston told me at the end of the workday these two bankers would take off their suits and come outside and join the occupation. They've since left industry, and one of them now works for a financial reform nonprofit. It's not enough to ask people to walk away. You have to give them something to walk towards. I believe that free software and hacker culture can be exactly that, a future to walk towards. As an activist, I was never trying to save the world or fix the system. I was just trying to help people who asked. Things are too big and too broken to fix, whether it's the political system or SSL. They're going to collapse under their own weight eventually. Rather, I was playing a long game, planting the seeds for what came next. Telecomix was immensely pragmatic and deeply principled. We didn't know what we were doing half the time, but we always knew why. Every situation was different, and there was no manual, not that we would have read it anyway. We relied on our talents, our ethics, and each other. What hackers have to offer is not only technology, but culture and community, a way of being and belonging that can help rebuild a world that is broken, afraid, and alone. When we write free software, we create obligations for ourselves to fix bugs and merge patches, and opportunities for others to contribute. A good free software project becomes like a community garden. It needs tending, and it begins to rebuild democratic habits from the ground up. Beyond technology, we can apply our practices to other problems and thereby bring hacker culture to a society in desperate need of new ideas. I mean, who here doesn't wish the other 362 days of the year could be a little bit more like PyCon? My journey towards activism really began in 2007 when I was living far from home while my wife did ethnographic field research. She'd come back from a long day of interviewing autistic teenagers and getting lost to find me freaking out about drones or rendition or whatever. And while she listened to my concerns, she eventually told me it was too much, that I had to find other people to talk to. Well, I found them, and we not only talked, we did something. If there's one thing I want you to take away today, it's the importance of getting off the couch. I don't care what you do, whether that's protesting an abortion clinic or holding the door open for an old man, but do something, or apathy will be the death of us all. Let me make sure this point is clear. Donating is not doing. I love the EFF, they're my lawyers, and a great organization, and you should give them all of your money. But if giving money is all you do, you're as much a part of the problem as the lobbyists and politicians. It doesn't absolve you from the responsibility of acting directly. At this point, some of you probably think this is all a bunch of cypher hippie bullshit. But I've heard at this very conference how hacker culture can be transformative. In a city separated by language and history, the Montréal Python user group is one of very few spaces where French and English speakers gather together and find common cause. The final story I'd like to tell is from a few days ago. I overheard a barista in my hometown talking about her upcoming trip to Montreal and where she planned to learn how to code. Whether or not she comes back from PyCon understanding how to make a web page, she will go home changed from having spent time here, spent time with us, and that gives me hope. Thank you. So I could have stood up here and, thank you. I could have stood up here and told you stories for probably 3 hours, but I kind of just wanted to let things be driven a little bit by what people were interested in. So if there's time, I'd love to take a few questions.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got lots of time for questions. So it's now 31 part. We have about 8 minutes for questions. So please step up. There's some microphones in the middle. And I want to say, please, everyone, give Pete a huge hand again. This is inspirational stuff, so thanks a lot. I mean, I have hundreds of questions if you guys don't. Go right ahead.
Thanks for the talk. It was great. I wanted to know, well, I've been hanging with activists lately, especially in Montreal. As you know, there's a lot of protests going on. And I've heard a lot of activists say it's useless to protest anymore. And personally, I don't believe that's true, but I don't know what to tell them.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. You know, like I said, you know, when I helped organize protests, you know, in some ways, whatever the particular issue was secondary for me. You know, that we'd go out in the streets and we were against whatever we were against, whether that was ACTA or SOPA or Law 78 here. And those things are important, but in a lot of ways, I like seeing people in the streets. Like, I like seeing people out there getting politically involved and getting politically active, and I think that is almost more important long term than whatever the particular their cause is. It's just going out and actually doing something, actually getting people involved in trying to, make their society and their world a little better. Whether you win or lose on a particular issue, like every time we do one of these things, we get a few more people to help.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Hi. What do you think we should do about the perception that free software supporters are just extremists or radicalists, or we just have beards like Richard Stallman?
Wow, we're still dealing with that? Gosh.
Well, people stop listening when they think you're a radical.
I mean, personally, that doesn't really bother me. I got called all sorts of names sort of as an activist, including a terrorist sympathizer. That was like when I stopped reading the comments. I just don't know. I think sort of given the success, I hate to say it, but like given the success of free software in the corporate world, that kind of can become a bit of a counter argument, right? I mean, this was the thing that Microsoft pushed in the 90s, right? That all free software developers were communists. And just clearly not. I don't know. I just go tell them that, hey, like Facebook runs on open source, Google runs on open source.
Free software.
Free software. Ooh, thank you. Thank you. Free software. Yeah. Okay.
Wow, fantastic talk.
Thank you.
I'm wondering what you guys do, guys and gals, in the off season when there isn't an ongoing, a particular revolution you're supporting.
Yeah, so actually we kind of fell into this by accident. The Telecomix was started out actually around local Swedish wiretap laws. In the 2.5 years, there wasn't an off season.
So it's still going?
Huh?
It's still going in there.
So, actually kind of not so much, it seems. In late 2012, our main IRC network got DDoSed for 4 or 5 months at like 10 gigabits per second for like 5 months. Like, we have I don't know who did that. Really, when you're talking about that much traffic, you're really into like nation-state level actor. And that really, I think, hurt our ability to coordinate and get things done, because we're not willing to use stuff that we don't run ourselves. And I think beyond that, particularly after the Snowden stuff came out, people have kind of gone off and done other things, other NGOs or kind of other activist stuff. A lot of people, there's a guy here in Montreal who now works for the Tor project. People are writing software. I don't know. It's always ebbed and flowed. Yeah. At a personal level, I got really burned out. I got really, really burned out, and I'm in a lot of ways just now kind of getting back to figuring out what to do in my life. But I don't know. It's spring. Maybe it's time for some new stuff.
All right, thanks.
Yeah.
Firstly, thank you for the talk.
Thanks.
So as a technologist myself, and someone who's interested in these sorts of things, I find it difficult to talk to people who are not so technical about these particular issues, and I was wondering if you had any suggestions for how I could go about getting those types of people involved.
Yeah, I mean, so like I said, like a lot of the Telecomix folks were not technical at all, and there's really stuff to be done, even as an internet activist, that doesn't require a great deal of technical knowledge. There's translations to be written, there's propaganda to write, there's art to make, there's just providing moral support sometimes is worthwhile. For people more broadly who just kind of just look at these issues at all and go, oh, okay, hey, so the NSA is reading all my email, like, why do I care? I almost don't know what to say to that. Just, ask them for their phone. It's like, okay, like, it's okay that the NSA reads your email, but I don't know. I used to say that, like, free speech in a lot of ways is like the fundamental right? That this is really the foundation of what effective self-governance requires. That, like, if we can't get together and talk about what we want collectively, like, it becomes, impossible to actually do anything. And so maybe that's an angle as well. I will say, though, that I don't think you have to let surveillance keep you from acting. I had, working as an activist, I helped run some of the pretty giant Twitter accounts, and we sort of assumed that the NSA was listening in on our stuff. I mean, despite being very public and very clear that I wasn't involved in anything illegal, I still wound up having chats with a federal informant. Just at some level, like with the ACTA protests, I think we were able to pull that off in part because it's hard to spy on stuff you don't understand. Like, this kind of networked organizing, it looks really weird. It looks really weird. If you're used to thinking about surveillance as being, on foreign government leaders or trying to break up, drug cartels or, the mafia, like when you're faced with a non-hierarchical organization, I think the governments just kind of go, huh, what's going on here? So, yeah, don't let that fear stop you.
Thank you.
Hey, so it sounds good on paper, right? You don't care about gender or creed or all that stuff. Is it working? Are you getting those people? And if not, how could it work better?
Getting which people? Sorry.
Well, women, people from a lower socioeconomic background,
Sure.
Especially in technical roles. Like, I know they're on the periphery, and I know certainly they were in Occupy, but are they actually helping you hack stuff?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. We had a whole range of different people participating. I do want to say there was a talk yesterday about kind of the problems of null process, and sort of this kind of classic problem from feminist theory called the tyranny of structurelessness, right? The idea that sort of, when you don't have structure, that sort of people who are quieter kind of don't have an opportunity to speak. This is going to sound a little weird, but sort of in Telecomix, that structurelessness served as a barrier to entry, and that was deliberate. We purposefully wanted to kind of keep things to a manageable size. During the Egypt revolution, the cluster swelled up to almost 500 people, and it nearly broke us. One of my friends from Anonymous said that, we tried to make a decision in a channel with 300 people, and it just didn't fucking work, right? And so, we'd have people show up at Telecomix and be like, hey, this is great, I want to help, tell me what to do. And we'd be just like, just hang out, for a couple days, you'll find something, whatever. And the idea there was that, one, we just kind of, as a basic political idea, just didn't want to give people marching orders, but it also was a way of selecting for the people who would be able to work with us and kind of be self-directed. I don't know. And that certainly meant that some people had to go off and find and do other things, but there's a lot of stuff to be done. I think it's a different case, compared to something like a tech conference where there is no upper bound. But yeah, it definitely was a problem for some people who just showed up, and then we didn't tell them what to do, and they left, and that wound up being okay. So.
Okay, guys, that's going to have to be the last question, and a brilliant answer, and answers all the way through, and a fantastic talk. So I'm sure you'll all join me in thank you, Pete. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we have about 10 minutes until the next talk, which is all about terminals and cursors and things like that.